Okay, all right, guys, we're going live. People are coming in. Buenas tardes, arrancamos en 20 segundos. Esperemos a que termine de entrar toda la gente al cuarto y arrancamos. Ok. Creo que ya podemos ir arrancando. Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think we don't need a lot of introductions, you know, in the living room with Winston. And after what happened last night, the first presidential debate between Vice President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump created a lot of sparks and comments from one side or the other. We have highly anticipated something, and we have invited David long ago, knowing that as we look forward from today until I think we have 34 days into the elections, we can get some light and guidance from another than the master, David Martin Darst. David, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Fabian, and thank you everyone for coming in to join us here in the living room. Our last visit together, as you may recall, was 78 days ago, to be exact. That was on July the 14th, Bastille Day, and a lot has happened. I'll go through that in a moment, but I think everybody wants to talk about last night's debate and then fold that into how the what the election's implications might be. That's what I'm going to focus on today. Couple of things before we get into last night's debate. Let me just tell you how unbelievably proud I am of the United States of America that you could have two people like that up there calling each other names. Do you know how many countries you cannot do this in? Find me countries where you can go after Putin like that, okay? Find me countries in other parts of the world where you can, these two leaders can attack each other with such vehemence, vitriol, vociferousness, velocity, okay? It was and vitriol, okay? So that's one thing I want you to know. I'm proud of our country. I think there's certain things that I was not proud of based on last night's debate. But let me also remind people, this is a classically American exercise to have this happen. Not only can it only happen in our country, but Americans love to criticize each other and fight like cats and dogs, okay? And this is not anything new. Everybody's telling me this morning, calling up, they're despondent. Fabian, Miguel, you know Stephanie, she called up and said, oh, I'm so depressed. I said, listen to me. This 1800, you had John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. That was the first peaceful transfer of power in America in history between two parties, the first time, okay? And our pal Thomas Jefferson wanted to go and expand the United States through the Louisiana Purchase. John Adams and the Adams family wanted to stay New England focused and Britain focused. No, if the fighting was unbelievable. 1824 and 1828, you had John Quincy Adams fighting Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's from my home state of Tennessee. He was a poor boy. He was a military boy. He was a leader. Battle of New Orleans. Forget it. He was a country boy. He was a bumpkin. You have the John Quincy Adams royalty, the nobility, and the fighting was unbelievable. Last night was nothing compared to these two. Go back and read the history books. Number 3, Henry Clay versus James K. Polk. Henry Clay was the last big leader of the Whig Party, and James Clay Polk wanted to acquire, listen to me, He wanted to acquire, this was nothing last night. He wanted to acquire Texas. He wanted to acquire California, and he wanted to acquire Oregon by force if necessary. And you would not believe the fighting that went on in 1844. And there was a guy, listen, Polk would not have won except for a third-party candidate named James Birney. And he got just 2.3% of the vote. But he got New York's electoral votes. He got enough that he basically, Polk won, and the United States now has Texas, California, and Oregon. And don't forget, 1860, Abraham Lincoln fighting against Breckinridge. Breckinridge, Colorado is named for this guy. And the fighting over slavery was unbelievable. So don't come to me and say this is a low point for America. This was a high point for America. Am I proud of it? No. Last night, this was a contest for the soul of the country. Was I pleased with no diplomacy? Was I pleased with no statesmanship, no civility? Was I pleased with the interruptions, the crosstalk, the lack of decorum, the insults, the global brawl that was happening? And people, they interviewed people coming out. They were so distressed and they were disillusioned and they were disappointed and they were angry. They said both candidates lost the night. And they say that the public was the loser. Okay, yes, but America was the winner. Believe it or not, this was a classic. Anybody that's been around in the 60s and seen some of this crazy stuff, that's the fighting that went on the 68 convention in Chicago. Now, many people walked out and said, the hell with it. They don't plan on a vote. They wonder whether they should even have another. The two big winners of last night, one was the enemies of the United States. In today's world, look at my phone. You see this phone here? And the enemies will tape this and send it all over the world as part of their propaganda. Okay? Our enemies, and you know who our enemies are. They don't want to see us do well. They will use this. They were one of the winners. It was not a great night for anyone there. Either candidate, much less the moderator. Okay? What each did last night is not going to change anything. And you know what? They didn't go and fight each other. They didn't touch one another. Thank God we had COVID. If we hadn't had COVID, maybe these two guys would have been wrestling. All I know is, and one candidate came to play tennis, and the other candidate came to play badminton. One candidate came to play football, soccer style, and the other one came to play rugby. One came to do boxing, and the other one came to do wrestling. So they were not really grappling with each other. Listen, don't forget, Jimmy Carter gave you Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. Jimmy Carter gave you, the reaction to Jimmy Carter gave you 12 years of Reagan and Bush. Bill Clinton, 8 years of Clinton gave you George W. Bush for 8 years. And George Bush gave you Obama for 8 years. Now, I just want to come back to William Shakespeare's longest play, Hamlet. Shakespeare lived from 1564 to 1616, 52 years, 37 plays. His longest play is 30,557 words long. It's called Hamlet. And Hamlet is ostensibly about this guy that's mad because he thinks Claudius has killed his father and married Gertrude, his mother. Okay? That's what it's supposedly about. No, it's really about Fortinbras, who comes in at the end of the play after Hamlet has stabbed Laertes with a poison sword, which he's been stabbed with, and Fortinbras takes over. And we need to keep in mind, as we have this debate and we have this election, we have several major issues as a nation, as a society. Debt to GDP ratio is 100%, okay? We have deficits, $3.3 trillion. How are we paying this? We're printing money. We're debasing currencies. And this, while the children are fighting over a candy bar, the house is on fire. These are threats to our way of life. I would have loved to have seen. You don't want to see. These are like parents. All of us watching the debates are like children watching our parents. You don't want to watch your parents fight. You don't want to see your parents drunk. No way. You don't want to see them misbehave. It makes you feel diminished. But I would have loved to have seen a touch more. I would have given anything for a bit more American patriotism and love of this country and a bit more humor and geniality. Neither candidate, listen to this, neither a candidate was willing to disavow. Do you understand what that means? To disavow the extreme elements of each of their parties. Neither candidate was willing to tell their armies to stand down. So this, people are going to use this against America, but this was a classic. This was a classic case of America in some ways at its absolute best, in which you can do this, and not one of these guys is in jail for this. Not one of these guys has been sent to Siberia for 6-7 years, like Mikhail Khodorkovsky. They took his oil company away from him and sent him to the gulag. Now, let me, before we get into further about the election, I just want to run down an update of some of the things that have happened since we were, and we'll get back into the election in a moment. You're going to love this. Since we talked last, you've had Amazon and Apple have both become, at one point, $2 trillion. Do you realize that the GDP of Brazil has 211 million people. Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world, 8.5 million square kilometers, 3.5 million square miles, 1.9 trillion. You're telling me that one company is worth more than the GDP of Brazil? And if you had to pick one to own for the next 10, 20 years, would it be Apple? Maybe. Or would it be Brazil? This is how crazy this world is. Another crazy thing that's happened since our last call was SoftBank, okay, which famously lost billions investing in WeWork. Yes, they invested that one time in Tencent and made billions, but they've lost billions in WeWork, and they bought options on stocks. They spent $4 billion to buy options covering $50 billion in stocks. The favorite stocks, you know which ones they are: Amazon, Facebook, Google, Netflix, you know them. And they drove up the stock market and got all of the other amateurs crazy and involved. So look, TikTok, Oracle, the balkanization of the internet. You better get ready. The Department of Justice has already given two warnings. They're going to go after some of these big tech companies, and that might be a risk to them. V-shaped recovery. Since we spoke in July, you had a phenomenal August. You had a phenomenal July. September has basically been down 4.5%. Who cares? It was needed. This is a much needed cleansing, purging, and catharsis. You've had residential real estate go very strong, and commercial real estate, hotels, office buildings, shopping centers, apartment buildings. The big four of commercial real estate have been suffering. You've had these IPOs, Snowflake, Warren Buffett buying IPOs now. Okay, you've had Snowflake, you've had Tesla split, you've had Apple split, and they go up just because they split. The political attitude and the political atmosphere has hardened. We just talked about that. We've had vilification. That comes from the Anglo-Saxon word vile, to make small. You've had vilification, and you've had a change in government, a change in leadership in Japan. You've had people moving out of the cities. You've had the suburbs. People are worried. Now, before we get back to the election, I want to mention something here. And as crazy as you think things have been this year, I called up one of my best friends this morning and told him some things. And he said, I thought it was going to shock him. He said, so what? 2020, you cannot shock me anymore. Basically, we need to prepare for big changes in the next 5 years. This is a blessing that we are being warned to prepare for big changes. I don't know what they are. They might relate to currency. They might relate to armed conflict. They might relate to pandemics. They might relate to terrorist attacks, and they might relate to cybersecurity. This is a warning bell. So think about your asset allocation. Think about your investment strategy. Listen, you've got three things, and here I'm quoting Ray Dalio. You've got the debt money cycle. What is the value of money? What will happen to this debt? Will the dollar retain its value? Everything else pales in comparison to the importance of this. You have wealth, opportunity, and values and education gaps. How are we going to address this? Are we going to do it collaboratively? Are we going to do it cooperatively? Or are we going to do it clashingly? This is second big challenge. And number three, you have, in case you haven't noticed, the rising of a great power to challenge the existing power of the United States of America. You talking about this morning's Wall Street Journal shows that China, through skillful diplomacy at the United Nations, of the top 5 agencies of the United States nations, China is at the head of the 4 of them. Okay, so you've got the rising. Now, I'm not the first person to say this. This is exactly the same way it was in 1930 to 1945. You had 0 interest rates and money printing and a new currency system. Number 2, you had fascism, communism, totalitarianism, and the New Deal. And number 3, you had Germany challenging the existing order in Europe, and you had Japan challenging the existing order in Asia. So this is time for every one of us on these calls to sit back and think about, how do we want to be positioned? The bullish factors, you know what they are. The Fed is helping. Lower for longer interest rates. Improving GDP. This couple more days, you're supposed to get the GDP for the third quarter. And it's supposed to be, after negative 5% annualized in first quarter, negative 31.7% second quarter, supposed to be 30 to 35% in this quarter. You got corporate profits, estimates are improving. Payrolls, the housing sector, retail sales, industrial production, lead economic indicators, durable goods orders. They're doing better, a little slower than earlier, but they're doing better. And don't forget, vaccine hopes. On the bearish side, you've got a potential second wave coming of the coronavirus. Maybe it's hit already. You've got the decreased possibility. Stephen Mnuchin, Nancy Pelosi, they said they were talking yesterday, but you've had the decreased possibility of a CARES 2 package. You do have this unbelievably unmistakable signs of speculation. I talked about the initial public offerings, 94 billion year to date. SPAC, this is special purpose acquisition companies. Blank check, you give people your money, you don't even know what they're going to do with it. 40% of the 95 billion, 94 billion is in these special purpose acquisition companies. Trading apps, message boards, Robinhood. There's 3 stock markets right now. There's the FANG and these high-flying tech stocks. There's the Robinhood stocks, and there's everything else. And you've got to keep that in mind as you set your asset allocation right now. You've had this furious options activity. Now let's get back to the election. Since 1860, there have been 22 times when incumbents were running. They have won 15 times out of the 22. That's 68%. They've lost 7 out of the 22 times. That's 32%. You had Jimmy Carter, inflation, and Iran. That's what hurt him badly. Jimmy Carter, inflation, and Iran. He lost. You had George Bush, the first in 1992. He lost, mainly because of read my lips, no new taxes. So you have, I think the top issues right now are the economy, the coronavirus, healthcare, race relations, crime and violence, China, securing the border, and climate change in order, according to the NBC poll that just was just conducted. To me, the risks and the opportunities, basically the opportunity for Trump as a candidate would be great economic data, a leadership moment. The great opportunity for Biden would be the strong debates. I wouldn't give either of them a tremendous performance yesterday. And the risk for both of them would be unscripted moments for either of them, a debate disaster. I don't think either of them scored well. I don't think either of them scored horrendously poorly, depending on your point of view. So this, I think, is what we're looking at. Listen to me, the highest extremely enthusiastic intention to vote ever recorded by CNN. In 2007, that was for the 2008 election, 54% said they were extremely enthusiastic and likely to vote. It ended up being 62. In 2011, 2012, it was 58%, 59% ended up voting. In 2015, 2016, 48%, and it ended up being 60% voting. This year, it's 74% intend to vote. Now, mail-in ballots, 8% in 96, 10% in 2000, 13% in 2004, 16% in 2008, 19% in 2012, 21% in 2016, and this year is expected to be 30 to 39%. And that's going to bring up the whole possibility of what I call, what you might want to call hurricane election. And that is, you've got this historic interest in voting. You've got this record turnout who say that everything really matters a great deal. You've got huge partisan differences. You've got foreseeable failures, pandemic delays, dislocated voters, too few volunteers, postal speed, and new voters by mail, and misinformation. Then you have the media. You have the media who encourage outrage, and they amplify this not only on the media, but on social media. And finally, oh my gosh, you have armed groups already facing off on the streets. And let's hope that they don't actually start shooting at one another. Now, where do I come out on this? You've got four scenarios. You've got Biden becomes with a blue wave and they win the Senate. You got Biden, but the Senate stays Republican. You got Trump with the Senate Republican, or a red wave. And that was right now given a low probability. But you have got to look at your portfolio, energy and financials and communication services. That's a new group that includes Google, Facebook, Netflix, Disney, those companies. You've got to look at those companies and think about what would a different kind of election outcome mean for this. You have mixed would be consumer discretionary, healthcare, materials, real estate, and corporate bonds. And positively leaning would probably be materials, utilities, and renewable energy. Our stress in the July 14th call and today, our stress is you want to find companies that can weather Democrat, red wave, blue wave, partial wave, purple wave, anything. Companies that have balance sheet strength, that have business model strength, okay? That they basically have a good size total addressable market, TAM, that they have competitive strength within this big market, return on equity strength, dividend strength. This is where you want to be positioning yourself. Let me close by giving you couple of quick comments on asset allocation. And I talked with Fabian and Miguel about this at the beginning of the call. There are 5 parts of asset allocation. I'm not going to get into it in great depth today. It's diversification. That's asset categories, asset classes, geography. Okay. It's having assets that don't act like each other. There's risk management. Do you know what you own? Do you know what your manager owns? What's the real role of cash? Ray Dalio says that cash is worthless in the next 10 years. What do you think? The role of real assets, that's gold, okay? It's real estate. The role of financial assets, it's rebalancing. If you own some technology stocks that have become a huge portion of your portfolio, I'm sorry, you've got to start to trim. If you own energy stocks that are down to 2% of the stock market, in 1980, energy was 30% of the stock market. Today, energy's 2%. Everybody hates energy. Find me some good quality banks. Find me some good quality energy companies that have a dividend yield that they're going to protect and not cut. And you know what? Own some of these. I call these things, they are in a way, I call them the new bond market. And the new bond market is not bonds. The new bond market is stocks that have yields that are above the yields on their bonds. And they're going to be able to keep the yields. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Comcast. I'm talking about McDonald's. I'm talking about Johnson & Johnson. I'm talking about Starbucks. Now, let me wrap up. Before we all get crazy here, and I had to calm down some of these people who were traumatized by last night's debate. Before we get crazy, I want you to remember, as sure as God made little green apples, when you get to the first quarter of next year, I don't know whether it's January 1st or March 31st, but you get to the first quarter of next year, you're going to have a new president, you're going to have a new vaccine, and you're going to have an economic recovery that's comparing against the terrible economic performance of this year. So you're going to have new president, new possibility or new actuality and reality of vaccine, and you're going to have an economic recovery that's a year old and positive comparisons. With that, I will turn it back to you, Miguel, and our friends, Fabian Onetti at Winston Capital Advisors, to see if there's some questions. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, David. Touched on a lot there, a lot of great points. Fabian, I think, is having some trouble. He's hopping in and out of the meeting, but we have a lot of questions in the chat, so I'll field you some of those in the meantime. So people talking about a little bit about what changes do you see the Democrats taking the White House and the Senate if we're going to talk about a new year, a new president, and comparisons being made? What do you see if that's one of the scenarios? What's your outlook?
Miguel, I thank you very much. And I thank everybody who sent that in as a question, because let me tell you, we have corporate taxes and we all have individual taxes. Now, a lot of the people on this call have a global outlook. They are not necessarily subject to the full range of the American tax rate. But let me tell you, the people on this call who pay U.S. taxes, you're going to have an increase of income and payroll taxes are going up, Miguel. You're going to have, if you have a Democratic sweep, you're going to have dividends and capital gains taxes. Right now, at the top rate, they're about 23.8%, everything included. That could go up to 43.4%. And you need to think about, everybody on this call, part of asset protection is, where do you have your assets? Not only physically located, but what kind of account? Is it tax-free? Is it tax deferred? Or is it taxable? And finally, for anybody who's might pay estate taxes, right now, under current law, an individual can give away $11.58 million, or if they're married, a married couple can give away a total of $23.16 million tax-free. to their heirs, to their children, whatever. If this comes in, it's likely to be retroactive, and that will go from 11 and 23. Instead, it will go to 3.5 and 7 million. So depending on to your point, Miguel, depending on who wins, it's possible that your family could pass along wealth tax-free, basically on December 31st, that the next day, one day later, you pay millions in taxes. So talk to your tax advisor. I'm not a tax expert. Talk to your tax advisor and make sure. But you've got corporate taxes, you've got individual taxes, payroll, income, estate, and capital gains taxes.
Thanks for that. Also, just to follow up,
David,
what do
I'm
you
back
think
here.
about?
Thank you. Quick question.
Oh, there's Fabian. Sorry,
No.
Go ahead, Fabian.
Can you
I'm listening.
hear
That
me?
was Fabian.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with the internet. David, what do you think of, the market has done very well after all these issues. What do you think of Europe, Asia, emerging markets in equity markets?
Fabian, I think you can use the weakness that's taken place in September to begin to add to equities if you have plenty of cash. I would be thinking about starting to add in value in small caps and in international stocks. And there you have much lower valuations. You have not had the same degree of froth and exuberance and investor over optimism that you've had in the United States. But I feel you need to do this in you and I have talked about this for decades, Fabian. You need to do this in a disciplined way. It's not time. Let's say you want to have 10 or 15% or 20% international, okay? It's not, don't do it all at once. Take it in stages, maybe 6 months at a time. And I don't know that there's a lot of rush to go and make some of these changes before the election. I let the election play out and then see how it is beginning to unfold. On that point, the US dollar. The dollar was strong when the market was going haywire in March. It was up 7%. Now it's come back. It was up on the weekend. It was about 1% up. The DXY index was up, was flat for the year. The Wall Street Journal index and the DXY index were flat for the year. Our thinking is the United States wants to have the dollar weak, but not so weak as to set off a currency crisis. So you want to think about, look, the Argentine peso through Friday was down 21% this year. The Brazilian real was down 27.7%. Those are special cases. Whereas Europe was up 3.7%, Japan up 2.9%. So I think you can start to nibble, Miguel and Fabian, you can start to nibble, but don't buy more than a quarter of the intended target position that you're going to put in international.
Thank you, David. I don't know if you asked this, Miguel, but what do you think might happen if the Democrats sweep the Congress, basically, not only take the presidency?
We were talking about that, and we went over some of sort of the tax fears, and I wanted to follow up with some more political commentary because as David was saying, some people don't capture the full kind of message not being here and not living through the tax code. And one of the things I found the most interesting, and I wanted David to take, was how do you feel about this intense politicization of the tax code in kind of a very filtered down, dumbed down way? I hadn't quite seen it before. I mean, I had seen it, discussed in dissected and inspected by kind of more specialized media. But this time around, you simply saw before the debates, Trump paid $750 in taxes, Biden paid $3 million, discuss. When we all know that the tax code in this country is incredibly complicated and it's not that simple to just politicize it and weaponize it that way. So I wanted just maybe a couple notes from David on that.
People called me after they New York Times article, cover page, that Trump paid only $750 in taxes. And they were,
Yeah.
so these were people that are on the liberal side of the spectrum, whom I respect and love and admire. And they were going crazy that he had only paid $750 in taxes. I said, are you kidding? I got a refund of $40,000. He has the wrong accountant. He should have gotten a refund. He's a stupid guy. How did he do that? So Miguel, in all seriousness, the taxes and the billionaires, I think this touches on a big issue that you, I think, are highlighting, which is the societal and the economic divide that's in this country.
Mhm.
We don't have fighting like this unless basically, if you put animals in a cage and you take the food away, they start fighting at each other. And this is what's happened here. And in good times, people say, I don't care what Jeff Bezos is worth. I don't care what Mark Zuckerberg is worth. God bless. This is America. We celebrate that.
Right.
I don't care what LeBron James is worth. I don't care. But right now, there is this, when people are suffering and when they have week to week issues and childcare and paying for things, and listen, they tell you inflation is low, but the things you spend money on are education, okay, housing and healthcare. And there's been inflation in all of those, okay?
Mhm.
So I think this country needs, and maybe this is part of the crisis and the cleansing that this country needs to move us to the next phase. You go back and look at the 60s and the 70s, and you had riots, and you had burning, and you had Watts, and you had Chicago. You had these terrible, terrible conditions. And in 1976, 77, the bicentennial, 200 years, everybody said this country was finished. The wheels were coming off of America. 2 years later, 11 kids started Microsoft in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Okay. And this is setting the stage. Let me tell you, one of the things that makes me the most bullish of all is the millennial generation is bigger than the baby boomers. This year, they're going to pass the baby boomers by 500,000 people population wise. And these are the kids that are 20 something to 38. Okay. And they are going to take us to new high ground like we haven't seen. But first, we're going to go through some very, very scary, dark times. And we must pay attention and not lose sight of the really important. You can get a new eyeball. You can get a new liver. You can get a new kidney, okay? As long as your blood is sick. But if your blood is sick, we cannot make you well. And your blood is the United States dollar. The dollar must not be allowed to be trashed. Fabian and I have talked about this for 20 years or more.
Great. Miguel, any other questions in the line?
I just got one. What do you think of the USD? Which alternatives do you see? I think with the bullish message, we got a little bit of that answer, but do you want to add anything, David?
People are talking about China, renminbi. You know, there's basically a tripolar world now. And one of the things the United States should be doing is doing everything to help build Europe to be strong. Europe needs to be a player. There needs to be 3 players in the world, okay? North America and the Americas as a whole. There needs to be Europe and there needs to be Asia. Europe needs to be a player, not the field on which the Asian and American players are playing. Europe needs to be a field. And that's another thing that the United States should be trying to do is build up Europe. And that would indicate maybe some strength to the, Europe is a different story than America. Denmark is so different than Gijon, Spain. Okay, it's very different. So we've got to figure out the best way to give strength to Europe so that it is a strong player.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. And again, like always, this was a great thing. When are the next 2 debates, David? You had the dates. 20 what?
The next debates?
Yes.
The 15th. We have the 15th, Fabian. We have the 22nd. The 15th is in Miami, Florida, where you and I spent some wonderful time at my Art Basel Miami Beach. We have that's the third debate, which will be in Nashville, Tennessee on the 22nd. We have the vice presidential debate is on the 7th of October, and that will be in Salt Lake City. And the election, you know this, the election is less than 5 weeks away.
Yes, sir. November 3rd, I believe. All right. Thank you, everybody. And definitely, David, next time we're going to invite you is going to be after the elections. Probably, I don't know if that Wednesday, if the election is not defined, but definitely we'll find the day that you come in after the elections to either tell us what President Trump will be doing in the next 4 years. Will he be a lame duck or not? Or what President Biden will propose to the Americans.
Fabian, we'll schedule it after we hope we know the victor.
That's the point. That's the point. That's what I'm
Yes.
saying. The Wednesday after might not be a good idea because we might have no victor that Wednesday morning, right? So I agree. We'll get back to everybody. Thank you, everybody. Muchas gracias. And we'll connect like always every day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.